What if I told you that the solution to anxiety, stress, and emotional disconnection isn't complicated, expensive, or reserved for experts? What if the answer is something so simple that a 3-year-old can practice it, and yet powerful enough to influence thousands of lives? Before you dismiss that idea, stay with me. Because this story begins in a way many of us understand deeply, with a parent trying to do her best in a world that feels overwhelming. Imagine being responsible for shaping 3 young lives. 3 energetic boys who see you as their doctor when they're sick, their chef when they're hungry, their coach when they're struggling, their counselor when they're upset, and somehow expect you to have unlimited patience every single day. Parenting is often described as one of the toughest jobs on the planet, not because it lacks love, but because it demands so much of your emotional energy. Like most parents, she wanted something very simple for her children. She wanted them to grow up happy. She wanted laughter in their childhood, meaningful friendships, emotional strength, kindness, and compassion. She wanted them to become adults who didn't just survive the world but contributed to it. But then comes the uncomfortable reality. Across the globe, hundreds of millions of children and over 1 billion adults struggle with anxiety, depression, and behavioral challenges. Emotional distress is no longer rare. It is widespread. And whether we admit it or not, children absorb what they see. They notice our stress. They feel our tension. They watch how we handle frustration. Even when we try to hide it, they sense it. So the real question becomes, how do we raise emotionally healthy children when so many adults are still trying to figure out happiness for themselves? Here's the hopeful part. Research consistently shows that one of the strongest predictors of a satisfied adult life is emotional well-being during childhood. In other words, happiness is not random. It can be practiced. It can be strengthened. It can be taught. But how? The answer to that question didn't come from a research lab. It came from a childhood memory. When she was young, every Christmas morning, instead of staying home surrounded by presents, her father would take her and her sisters to the hospital where he worked. He was a doctor, and while most children were unwrapping gifts, they were standing beside hospital beds, singing carols to patients who couldn't be home with their families. At first glance, it might seem unusual. But something extraordinary happened in those hospital rooms. Patients who had been quiet and withdrawn began to smile. Some sang along. The atmosphere shifted. The room felt lighter. And as a child, she noticed something else. While the patients were clearly uplifted, she felt uplifted too. There was a warmth, a lightness, a quiet joy that stayed with her long after the singing ended. Years later, science would explain what she felt that day. When we give, whether it's time, attention, or kindness, our brains release chemicals that enhance mood. Endorphins create a natural high often referred to as the helper's high. Serotonin improves emotional stability. Oxytocin strengthens bonds and connection. Even cortisol, the stress hormone, decreases. Generosity doesn't just feel good metaphorically. It changes our biology. Giving is not a weakness. It is built into us. With that understanding, she decided to try something bold with her own child. On her son's 3rd birthday, surrounded by cake and celebration, she introduced a new family tradition. They would commit to one act of giving every single day for an entire year. 365 days, one intentional act each day. The reaction? Not the excitement she expected. Her son simply asked, "How many days are in a year?" Fair question. So she simplified it. Every day they would do one small act of kindness for a person, an animal, or the planet. It didn't have to be grand. It just had to be intentional. They started small and close to home. Donating old towels to an animal shelter. Picking up trash during a beach visit. Sorting recyclables together. Giving away clothes that no longer fit. Small actions, manageable for a 3-year-old. On the very first day, they walked into an animal shelter carrying blankets. The smell was strong. Dogs barked behind closed doors. Cats rested behind glass windows. When her son realized that the blankets they donated would keep those cats warm, something clicked in his mind. He made the connection between his action and someone else's comfort. He smiled, not because he received something, but because he gave something. That was the moment he understood. Giving created happiness. As days turned into weeks, the practice became routine. It wasn't forced. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply part of daily life, like brushing teeth. Sometimes it was as small as helping a neighbor. Other times it was writing a kind note. But every day included one conscious decision to contribute positively. Eventually, she began sharing their journey online, not expecting much attention. But people from different countries began responding. They shared stories of buying breakfast for someone who was homeless, helping children in need, organizing classroom kindness projects. One teacher reached out with a question: could this idea work in schools? Together, they developed a classroom version of the challenge. Students were encouraged to choose their own acts of kindness. It wasn't about control. It was about empowerment. In one classroom, children baked cookies for local firefighters to say thank you. In another, students organized a small fundraiser to support children battling serious illness. They didn't just learn math and reading. They learned impact. Teachers began noticing something surprising. Classrooms felt more connected. Students showed more empathy. Conflicts decreased. The atmosphere shifted from competition to collaboration. What began as a family experiment spread into multiple schools, touching thousands of children. And the most powerful part? The children led the movement. They discovered that their small actions mattered. Imagine that shift. Instead of feeling powerless in a big world, children began to see themselves as contributors. Instead of waiting to receive, they looked for opportunities to give. Now pause and consider this. If one child can complete 365 acts of kindness in a year, that's 365 positive impacts. Multiply that by a classroom. Multiply that by a school. Multiply that by a city. The ripple effect becomes enormous. But here's what makes this truly powerful. It doesn't require wealth, status, or special talent. It requires intention, a kind word, a helping hand, a moment of patience, a small sacrifice of time. We often believe happiness is something we must chase through achievement, recognition, or possessions. But what if happiness is something we generate through service? What if the path out of anxiety isn't found in isolation, but in contribution? This isn't about ignoring serious mental health challenges. Those require care and support. But daily generosity strengthens emotional resilience. It builds connection. It reminds us that we are not alone and that our actions matter. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this: children are watching. They learn less from lectures and more from habits. When they see generosity practiced consistently, it becomes normal. When they experience the emotional reward of giving early in life, it shapes their worldview. So here's the invitation. Start small. Look at your ordinary day. Is there someone you can help? Something you can share? A burden you can lighten? You don't need a grand plan. You need a single step. Because one give, repeated daily, becomes a habit. And habits shape character. And character shapes the world. If thousands of people adopted just one daily act of kindness, imagine the reduction in loneliness. Imagine the strengthening of communities. Imagine the quiet confidence growing inside children who realize they can create change. Happiness doesn't arrive fully formed. It grows through practice. And here's the thought I want to leave you with. If a simple daily act of giving can transform a 3-year-old's understanding of the world, what might it do for you after 30 days, or 100 days, or a full year? And what kind of world would we wake up to if we all decided to find out?